Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode here of Duelists and Drunkards. I'm Mr. Panda.
And I'm Rockstar.
This is the podcast where it's dangerous to go alone. Here, take this podcast.
I get it!
We're going to start things off by refreshing our convention schedule for you for the remainder of the year. We just got back from Cleveland Comic-Con, and now we're going to be heading into a double con weekend. Really only one day, on October 13th coming up. Actually, by the time you see this, we'll be on our way to at least one of those locations. So we're going to Yushicon in East Stroudsburg, which is a little bit closer to our home turf. And then at least a few of us will be down in Virginia for KantaiCon, being held at a tank museum in Danville, Virginia. Very excited about that. We've got a little bit of a gap after that, and then we're back here in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania at the university in the Centennial Hall building on October 27th for the O3 Media Festival. Very excited about that, a little more personable. We're going to be previewing some new content. Really good chance to just kind of chill out and relax. The following weekend, we're going to be down in South Carolina for BonsaiCon in Columbia. So if you're from the far south, now's your chance to see some Manly Battleships content. That's about as far south as we go since KantaiCon moved up to Virginia. And finally, for the remainder of the year, it looks like our last con is going to be DerpyCon. So right after BonsaiCon, we're going to be in New Jersey, in Morristown, where the food is wonderful, the crowds are nice, everyone has a good time at DerpyCon. So be sure to check it out. We've got a bunch of very wide-range, interesting game show stuff prepared for you. So come by and check it out. With the con schedule updated, we're going to head straight into current events. And the first thing we're going to talk about is Chris Evans retiring from his role as Captain America in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Rockstar, what can you tell us about this?
Well, after 7 movies, 3 cameos, and a video game that he voiced as Captain America, he finally tweeted out that, unfortunately, Avengers 4 is finally the last movie that he is ever going to do. He stated multiple times that he was going to do it, but he kept coming back as Cap America, but this time he's finally confirmed it. Chris Evans is mostly doing this move because he wants to move on to other roles, and I can't say I blame him, but it has been 8 long years of him playing Captain America, and I know that he will sorely be missed.
The Human Torch, Captain America. Clearly next, he will be Batman. Next up in current events, we have an update to the release schedule for Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. This is coming to Amazon Video. Very excited to hear about it. So is Mr. Neil Gaiman. I'll never know how to pronounce his name correctly. Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman.
I usually say Gaiman.
Gaiman.
I believe he's also mentioned he's excited that Good Omens is finally coming to fruition in video. He just wishes Terry Pratchett could be here to see it.
Well, we all kind of wish Terry Pratchett was still around, but he was old. So yes. It was inevitable. Man, he's written a lot of books.
Yes, he has.
Man, I don't even remember. There was a really good one in his, what is it called? The Discworld series?
Discworld.
I don't even remember what the book was called, but a dragon comes to life, and then there's this merchant in the city, and there's this really great passage about him locking himself in a vault. It's really great. It's been a while. Next up, we have a new trailer for Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. So if you are a fan or willing to jump into the new Star Trek season, you might want to take a look at that. Or might not.
No. Because if you're into TOS and you like the original canon, you're probably wondering why the hell there was a bearded Spock in the trailer.
Picky.
Oh, come on. They're screwing around with the canon.
I think we already covered this with the whole, the spore drive. Meanwhile, with Telltale Games, we have an update. It's not just they're in development hell with the Walking Dead series. They actually have found a publisher to finish it out. Rockstar, what can you tell us? Give us a few more details there.
Robert Kirkman, who does a lot of the Walking Dead comics, his publishing company, Skybound, is finally going to finish out the last 2 episodes for The Walking Dead, so they'll actually have a finished produced game. And they will also be working with Telltale's original employees.
So there's at least one consolation for the employees, I guess. Finally, we have a last-minute tack on here. James Gunn, recently ousted mastermind of one of the more popular sub-franchises of the MCU, has been recruited to work on Suicide Squad 2 as a writer and possibly as a director.
I'm really excited.
We could all be very excited. It's just a darn shame that he's not going to be involved with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 for reasons we will not go into.
Of course, that might mean we might lose all the Guardians, too, while we're at it, but you know.
We're not talking about that tonight.
Then what are we talking about tonight, Panda?
Let's go ahead and head into our very first discussion topic. We'll give you a little preview here. Today we're going to be talking about Comic Cons and the future of conventions, and then later on in the evening we're going to be talking about Venom. So, stay tuned. First discussion topic. So as I said, our first topic is going to be about Comic Cons and the future of conventions. Sounds like a very broad and vague topic, but there's a reason for that. We just got back from Cleveland Comic Con, and it's giving at least me some pause to think. From time to time, people in my Facebook feed will go on about, well, what are conventions really about anymore? Why am I going to conventions? And very specifically, is there a future for conventions? Where's the growth factor? Because conventions really are their own sub-industry at this point. Mm-hmm. There's entire reciprocal industries based around facilitating conventions. When it comes to Comic Cons are kind of the new boy on the strip. And I don't mean that to say that they haven't been around forever. They have been around for a very, very long time. Them and kind of in companionship toy cons. But it's only been within, I'd probably say, just short of the turn of the century at the soonest, and more likely the 2000s, that we saw this explosion of regional and localized Comic Cons coming out of the crevices and starting to, I guess I would probably say, take advantage of the sudden spurt in interest that came with things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, I'm not a scientist in that particular field, but I imagine there's a little bit of data correlation between the rise of the MCU and the rise of the interest in going to Comic Cons. I think we could probably draw that scale.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, not as much interest in buying comics, and maybe that's part of the problem. So the question hangs there in the air. Is there a future in cons? And I think in order to really discuss that, we have to look at kind of a little bit of the historical precedent and see if we've seen similar ripples, if you will, in the potentiality of the convention scene. For that, I like to look at my own home state, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a little bit of an odd duck because at one point Pennsylvania had quite a few cons. I think we were up to at least planned and announced, I think upwards of 8 anime-centric conventions in one particular year. This is all per animecons.com, which is a really great resource, by the way, if you want to research conventions that used to exist. And what you'll find is that at one point there was like this implosion. Even if the event kind of lagged along and was still around, for example, like with Taki wasn't listed on animecons.com for many years, but they were still around. Most of the other ones kind of dropped off the face of the earth. In fact, one of the conventions that recently canceled from our schedule, ShikariCon, is one of those cons. It had its 2-year heyday and then fell off the face of the earth. It was, in fact, ShikariCon kind of like was part of that domino effect. A whole bunch of cons started disappearing in the 2000s, not just in Pennsylvania, but elsewhere too. My personal favorite subnote on that was ShojoCon. ShojoCon! And a lot of it had to do with consolidating. There was kind of a saturation point, I think, for the small anime conventions, because you can only spread your money so far. And even with the emerging, quote-unquote, third-generation otaku, as I would call them, most regional and local cons thrive on younger audiences. And so I think they were still playing catch-up with that. There wasn't enough money in the pool to kind of spread out and sustain them. The game has started to change with Comic Cons, I think, because a lot of Comic Cons tend to be a little bit cheaper, reg-wise. I don't think that's universally true, but many of them tend to be less than $40. Whereas I think I could probably pin the median anime con registration cost around $40 in the mid to larger size. So when you have a bunch of groups consolidating and then unconsolidating, then new fandoms show up, and what's really interesting is wondering whether or not the convention scene is ultimately going to take on the multifaceted nature that the fandom is starting to take on. Because right now it still feels like there's kind of these invisible walls between Comic-Cons and anime cons, which in many ways have actually facilitated the growth of Comic-Cons because people are used to that convention culture already.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, from our own experience at Cleveland Comic-Con and just attending certain ones elsewhere, I would say that at least in the growth stage, I think it's might be on the verge of changing, but Comic-Cons are not geared towards the same type of content. In fact, many Comic-Cons focus, at least the smaller ones in particular, focus almost exclusively on the ability to go and track down comics.
Yes.
You might you probably have an assorted group of guests, autograph signings, and things like that. But for example, the thing that we're most hot and heavy for, panel content, is very lean at Comic Cons for the most part.
Well, wouldn't that kind of reconcile with the growth of anime cons? You would know more about this. When you do your Otakudom panel, you usually talk about how the first anime con started and how it's mostly viewing sessions, and then eventually it became about trying to get merch that you normally couldn't get. So wouldn't that seem like the same kind of growth anime conventions had?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? Comic-Cons don't have the burden of having a legacy of, what's the word I'm looking for? Viewing rooms. Mm-hmm. A burden of the legacy of viewing rooms.
Well, what are you going to do? You're going to put on the comic on a projector and scan each one
I guess.
through?
I know a lot of Comic-Cons also kind of share space with horror and, well, of all things, professional wrestling. It's kind of interesting, though, too, because I actually get how those things kind of go hand in hand at times, because there's so much tied into things like whatever it is now, the WWE, WWF, whatever, like action figures.
Yeah.
And I actually would not be surprised if they did comics, but I mean, the soap opera about wrestlers, which is what they're doing essentially.
Well, I mean,
mirrors fandom content so well that I'm not surprised that wrestlers show up to Comic-Cons to sign autographs.
I could go into... I was taking this e-course, which was explaining why comics and superheroes exist. And it's kind of mirroring the myths of old, but for a newer generation. You could say that superheroes... Essentially, at some point, yeah, you could compare them to myths if you want them to, but sometimes it's more like soap opera. Like, oh my god, Jean died, so Cyclops decides to date Emma, and then, oh my god, somebody made a clone of Jean, and Jean comes back, and he's all confused because he doesn't know which one he wants to go with. So they're like soap operas too sometimes.
Thinking about what different kinds of cons offer, I think might be relevant too. For example, if we talk about anime cons, historically, there's that kind of focus on a viewing room. Mm-hmm. I'd say several older sci-fi cons kind of pull that too, but I feel like that might be less and less these days, just like it's less and less these days with anime cons as well. You have anime cons that are focused around the exposure and promotion of anime. You have comic cons that are very focused on the promotion of comics, comic purchase, and also the purchase of other kind of fandom merchandise. Just a very, very wide array of options.
Like my Tribble.
Yeah.
I got that from the Star Trek people.
Comic-Cons tend to focus around that expo center mentality. Like I said, we're looking at merchants, vendors, and guests. And frequently, those are actually in the same space. They just have a nice long line of tables where you just go through, pay your fee, and pick up your autograph. that also kind of mirrors old science fiction conventions that focus on the creators. These, in many ways, from a reputation standpoint, say like in the popular consciousness, not necessarily that popular of people, but you can go to a Comic-Con, you can meet authors, you can meet people who only had very minor roles in these obscure occult classic films. Like, what was it? At Cleveland Comic-Con, we actually got to see the Green Goblin head that was on the front of the truck from the movie Maximum Overdrive, based on the Stephen King novel.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting to see how wide of an array of stuff can show up at some of these places. Part of me isn't sure where I was going with this, but I know that there was a good point in here somewhere, so I'm going to bring it back around. In This Is Otakudom, which is one of the panel events that I work on, specifically, This Is Otakudom Fandom History in the American Otaku, because I have a feeling that This Is Otakudom is going to turn into like a series with different subtitles in it.
Yeah.
So, specifically when I talk about Otakudom in America, I talk about changes in the American anime con convention scene and the science fiction con convention scene to kind of illustrate how there was a demographic shift, where initially anime con fans gravitated towards the science fiction community, and then they kind of broke off and did their own thing. I don't know how much of the Comic-Con community really comes from the anime con community. That's something I'm still kind of working on looking into. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a lot of crossover just because nerds gravitate to other nerds and like watching nerdy things, which is why, what was it? Otaku no Video, is like the gauntlet of nerddom, where the characters like start off like making their own anime, then move on to do figurines, and like they have an interview with a military equipment otaku and stuff like that.
Right.
So I guess what I'm waiting to see is if the expo layout that is indicative of a Comic-Con folds itself into the more participatory, that's what I'm looking for, the more participatory format of anime cons. Because I think that might be one of the key distinctions, actually, admittedly, I'm not as experienced with Comic-Cons, but whenever people talk about Comic-Cons, I don't feel like they really go there to participate in anything. I feel like they might go to see a premiere. They might go to listen to the experts and industry people talk, if you can even get into the panel room to begin with. But I don't hear a whole lot about fan panels at Comic-Cons, like, ever. I'm not even sure if they do them.
Right.
And of course, like, we kind of straddle that line still, but I would never think of a convention not having people who are just off the street fans talking about nerdy stuff. Like, that seems like important to me.
Right.
And I feel like that to a certain extent has even, well, like many things, has kind of lost its sheen in what's left of the science fiction, of the pillar science fiction community. I'm rambling.
That's what you do in a podcast. It's called a really long ramble.
So in my really long, rambly way, what I'm trying to get at is, are we headed toward another bust? Now, I'm not just talking about the problem where New York Comic-Con is apparently holding judicial sway over names like Comic-Con. I don't actually think that's going to shut events down, per se. Though, I mean, it could scare out some of the smaller fry, but I don't think it's going to like end the existence of these events.
Oh, people will always find a way through.
Yeah, and what I am wondering, though, is if one of two things is going to happen. Either we see another bust, similar to the microcosm of Pennsylvania, where people's money just cannot sustain a reasonable amount of support for all these Comic-Cons. Because, I mean, they're just all over the place. And I'm sure, my understanding is that a lot more of them are privately owned, operated, so effectively for profit, even if they're not really looking to make a lot of money. They're strictly speaking for profit. Even major conventions like Kineticon, funny story, Kineticon, for example, which has been around for quite a while and is a multi-facet con, but has several elements of a Comic-Con. Not a nonprofit corporation, which I'm sure a lot of people might be surprised about because it was news to me when I actually bothered to dig into it. So even if they're not being operated as if they're like a major corporation and they want to make money, a lot of these are private ventures. And so if you're not making enough to, like, not just break even, but I mean to make it worth your time, I imagine a lot of them might start folding. And then what do people do? Are they going to just merge into other conventions? Who knows? The alternative, I think, is where the Manly Battleships philosophy comes into play. And this is the approach that, in my mind's eye, I favor as a future expectation. And that is, I think that conventions might be able to replace... I'm trying to think how best to word this, because I was pondering over this for several days, actually, the last time it came up in my Facebook feed, trying to elucidate exactly what I meant. I think conventions could potentially replace traditional brick-and-mortar hangouts as a concept. Let me explain to you why. We're seeing brick-and-mortar businesses fail all the time. There's a lot of different industries that have fallen completely by the wayside, and if you don't see them in a major city, you don't see them anywhere. Think about media companies like FYE. FYE, I love them to death. Their business model needs some upgrading. They're shifting to online, and their stores are dying. They are disappearing off the map. We still have the most of any state, but man, I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to hold on. One seems to be closing, at least on it's like an average of like one every 6 months or something. They're just closing out. Another good example would be arcades or family entertainment centers. Arcades are... Where's your nearest arcade, everybody? You're lucky to find a pinball machine that functions like at 70% in a pizza shop.
I can tell you where our nearest arcade from us is. At least the one I know. It's called The Works. You go down to West Reading. It's this amazing arcade place.
You never took me there.
I'd be happy to take you there, but you rarely go to Reading.
Wow. Rockstar has this awesome arcade and never took me there. Not in like all 10 years we've known each other has she ever told me there's an arcade in the poorest, poor city of Pennsylvania.
It's in West Reading.
Oh.
Oh, and there's laser tag on the other side. Like full on, there are 2 levels. It's fun.
So, for example, there's a very small arcade that's built into a family entertainment complex right near where we live. We never really go there. There are small arcades in places like bowling alleys. There is an amusement park within driving distance of where we live that also has quite a nice amusement park, and probably the nicest one within any reach of us that isn't at the Kalahari. But the Kalahari also is kind of a small city, so it also kind of counteracts my point. But I mean, like, if you go into other urban areas within reach, there aren't really arcades in, like, Wilkes-Barre. There aren't really arcades in Scranton, and those are not small cities.
I know that there used to be an arcade in one of the Wilkes-Barre malls, but even that closed.
Yeah, they got, like, maybe 3 machines or something. State College doesn't have an arcade. State College, one of the biggest schools in the country, cannot support an arcade. And that seems like something that college students might actually enjoy. So, there are other things, but I hope you get what I mean here. Now, I'm not trying to be like super precise that it's like, oh, well, I mean, laser tag will never make a comeback or something. But what I am saying is that things that seemed quintessential to your area maybe 20 years ago are not really as common as they used to be. I have a better representation in my mind now. Video rental, let's call it the video rental store effect.
Oh, no.
Do you know how many video rental stores used to be in Pennsylvania? A lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are down to 5 in the whole state.
We still have them?
Well, there's some people still renting. Well, it's not just like I don't know about the VHS tape aspect, but I'm saying video rental stores. Yeah, video rental stores. And I mean, like, even the Blockbusters in Alaska, the last bastion of hope for the franchise, have finally closed. So everything's moving on to digital. Mm-hmm. And I'm suggesting that what we might see with conventions will mimic the video rental store effect. Not so much digital, but the places and the means by which people come together for the purposes of entertainment will be unmoored from a brick-and-mortar concept. So, for example, if you live in the middle of Pennsylvania, let's just call it within an hour and a half's distance, you might see 4 cons. And I mean, I'm not going to suggest that we need a con every single weekend all the days of our lives, but I would also not put it past us to start actually seeing more conventions kind of weasel their way into little nooks and crannies. Kind of in the same way that wine festivals seem to be happening all the damn time. Even though it's the same wineries that you just did a taste testing of like 3 weeks ago. Now, you're still going to go and drink it, you drunk.
See,
I know I will.
That's why I'd rather do a painting and wine session. That sounds so much nicer.
Well, it's also participatory. And I think that's what I think that's how I'm going to tie it into what we try to do here, what we market as our service. I think that conventions should strive to be that weekend entertainment extravaganza. I think that someone should be able to walk in those doors and get something that they need, that they want, and for the price they pay is a value. Now, we could sit here all night and debate the aspects of paid autographs, which I'm just not going to get into, but paying that registration fee does give you access to a lot of things. Potentially access to, if not a free autograph, at least an autograph of some kind where there's going to be a lot of people that you want to see in one place. You get to see content ranging from the educational. You get to play games, at least in our content. You get to win prizes. You get something. You get to play in a video game room, more than likely, which, if you don't have an arcade, is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Not everyone has an arcade. The arcade will come to you. Yeah, it's one weekend out of the year, but you know what? That's a heck of an experience when you don't have the time, money, or travel means to go to one somewhere else. And you're going to spend at least $20 on quarters anyway. Not
to mention, sometimes, since it's an anime convention, they'll have Japanese arcades, which you'll definitely not see in an arcade, even if you can get to an American arcade.
And heck, even the viewing rooms have a certain amount of appeal because there might be situations where you don't have legitimate access to anime, and conventions kind of offer that avenue, the ones that still do viewings. If that isn't good enough for you, there's also dedicated entertainers, whether it be Manly Battleships, whether it be people like Uncle Yo, because he's retired now. And don't get me started on the musical acts. There's a lot of musical acts. And I don't just mean the burlesque troupes. No, I mean like legitimate bands that are just going to get up on stage and play for you. Any other time of the year, you might not pay $40, which is the entrance to the con, to see their concert, but you're getting everything else and the concert. There are so many things going on that individually, if you were to try to do them, would cost so much more. Instead, if you start thinking of your attendance as going to a fair, or, dare I say, an amusement park, or a circus, suddenly it feels a lot different. It feels a lot better. There's other things to do. And unlike a circus, you can actually leave the main stage and go do something else if what's on the main stage isn't appealing to you at that particular moment.
And you can also help fund your local artists.
Yeah, Artist Alley. Go meet people, see people. It's an art show. You have an art show that you didn't pay $20 for. Yeah, you still have to buy the booze separate, but you were going to do that anyway.
Is this literally, not that I'm disagreeing with you in the least, but is this like a 20-minute ad for our services?
No, not really. I was just explaining how this is so important to us. It is important to us. The nature of conventions... You should know this. The nature of what conventions are doing is not just our job. It's what we live for. Like,
right.
The fan community, the fan scene. We want to be in it. We want to be a part of it constantly. And we want to...
meet new people.
Yeah, we want to ride the change. We don't just want to ride and survive the change and how the convention scene is going to change. We want to thrive off of it. And we want you to thrive too. So join us in this mission. So, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, comments on what I've said so far? Because I feel like I've been monologuing here.
You kind of have been monologuing. But you pretty much covered... Like, even as an introvert, I find cons like my amusement park. It's not my job. It's something I enjoy doing. I enjoy getting up on stage and entertaining people. And then when I'm done with that part of it, it's like I've got a whole world to explore.
Maybe sit in someone else's panel for 5 minutes.
I was going to say buy more ponies, because clearly I don't have enough.
Do we see a future in cons? Is there going to be a growth, or is there going to be a retraction? What are you going to bet on? I'm betting on growth.
I'm betting on growth.
All right. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to roll into our next segment. Let's Play a Game is going to be this thing where we do some kind of silly or fun or maybe interesting activity together for you, the audience. Because Rockstar got sick of reading Cosmos sex tips and instead would like to try a quiz.
Well, it's kind of a quiz.
If you would like to take this quiz with us, it's entitled...
Which Song Would You Rather Have Sex To?
Hooray. Alright, so how are we doing this? Are we going to vote, or are we going to alternate, or what are we doing?
I'm going to ask the question, and we're both going to answer, not at the same time, obviously, but we're both going to answer whatever you prefer in your preference and why.
Okay.
Real quick. Not a long answer. I don't want to hear your life story of why this song gets you in the mood.
This section might be too hot for younger viewers.
So, number 1. Which song would you rather have sex to? 9 Inch Nails, Closer, or Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle?
Oh, definitely Welcome to the Jungle.
I was going to say probably 9 Inch Nails.
I get angry.
It reminds me of The Crow, and that
we
don't need we don't need to go down that road any farther.
Roxy is a sad person.
Number 2, Usher's Nice and Slow, or Justin Timberlake's Future Sex Love Sound.
I don't know either of those songs, so I'm going to go with the second one.
I've heard both of them, and I'd still go with Justin Timberlake.
Sing me a few bars.
Well, it says here. Ooh, will it play it?
No, I don't want to get zucked. Demonetized. So which one is this?
That one's Justin's.
No, that is gross.
So I guess you're going with Usher.
Yeah, I don't even need to listen to it. No, why would you have sex to that? That is so weird.
Because it's Justin Timberlake. His voice is just like...
That's like trying to have...
silk.
Ugh, that's like trying to have sex to Sexy Back. It's just weird.
Actually, I might.
No, Sexy Back is all about sexual tension. Having sex ruins it. It's like the horse.
Oh, okay, but you...
Gustavo! And the Rock of Gibraltar.
Exactly. You just watched Big Mouth. You have to understand that women like all the things around sex.
Why would you have sex to it then? That doesn't make any sense. Never mind.
Oh my
Go to
goodness.
the next one.
The next 2 songs are Beyonce, Partition, or The Weeknd, The Hills. Now I feel like an old timer because I've never heard either of these songs.
I'm just going to say Beyonce because I'll just imagine Beyonce. I have no idea. Why did we pick this one? We are too old for this.
Because I knew who Justin Timberlake was.
Oh, I see. All right, next.
Yeah, I'm just gonna answer Beyonce. Just
Good plan.
'cause.
Good plan.
Oh, Jesus Lord.
All right, come on.
The next two songs are both by Miley Cyrus. You have the choice of either Party in the USA or Wrecking Ball.
Okay, so Party in the USA, I would not have sex to. However, if that was what they were insisting upon, I would insist on a hand job, unlubricated, and I am not allowed to break eye contact.
During Party in the USA?
Yeah. If it was Wrecking Ball, I would just expect to be pegged. So neither of these really work for me.
I feel like you could get a better rhythm doing Wrecking Ball than you could do Party in the USA.
There's literally no rhythm to that song. Like, it drops off. You
clearly don't hear it the way I hear it.
I mean, I hear it, and then it drops off, and it's like, oh, okay, where's the rhythm now? So what? Like, it's gonna be, oh yeah.
I came in like a wreck!
Demonetized! Please don't ever do that again.
You either have Genuine Pony or Rihanna Rude Boy.
I don't know what that first one is.
You've never heard Pony?
I don't know. Does it go like nay, 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 nay or something?
No!
Now watch me whip. Now watch me nay, nay.
That is not that song. Jesus. I can't believe you haven't heard it. That's Rude Boy.
No, I'm sorry. Wait. No. Allow me to do my personal impression of the song Pony.
You are horrible.
Okay, no.
How? What are you talking about? Pony is actually listed on a lot of top 10 songs to have sex to.
I would rather have sex to dubstep.
Clearly, you don't understand what good sexy music is.
We will just have to agree to disagree.
Okay, so Rihanna's Rude Boy or Pony?
I'm going with Rihanna.
I'm going to go with Pony.
Ugh.
The next one is Etta James At Last or Mariah Carey's Hero.
You know, I'm a lot better with song lyrics than I am with titles.
At last.
What's the other one?
Okay, really?
Alright, I feel like the people who have sex to Mariah Carey's Hero are the same people who think that Take My Breath Away is something you want to have sex to.
I would have to agree with that, so I would go with Etta James At Last.
I guess I'll go with that too. Whatever.
Alright, the next one is Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run, or Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer.
Oh, wow.
Speechless.
I'm going to go with Bon Jovi just because the idea of timing out that halfway there sounds really weird and appealing to me. Now, if you had said Born in the USA, we might have ourselves a conversation here.
I was going to say, I'd have to go with Bon Jovi myself there.
All right, next.
So we're going to go back to, stuff we know because we're old. The Weather Girls, It's Raining Men, or Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive. I will survive if someone's pegging you, huh?
No, that would definitely be the first one. I'm going to go with the second one.
You're going to go with I Will Survive?
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't do it. I'd have to do It's Raining Men.
Different priorities.
That would be the only thing that could get me going in that particular scenario. The next one, Counting Crows Colorblind or the Sundays Wild Horses.
I'm going to go with Wild Horses because it invokes in my mind something powerful. The Rock of Gibraltar.
I am going to go with Counting Crows because I like the way the lead singer sings. Oh, joy of joys. We've hit Adele songs. You have the choice of either Hello by Adele or you have Someone Like You.
Well, since hello sounds like something that only old people could get off to, I guess I have to pick the other one by default, even though I don't even remember what it sounds like.
Never mind, I'll find someone like you.
I mean, it's slightly faster than the other one.
I think I'm giving it a flair. I'm pretty sure it's a slow song, too. I'd have to go with hello, because at least I can imagine Lionel Richie's answering her on the other line.
How does that help?
Because then I'd be picturing Lionel Richie.
No, see, no. Okay, now let me just explain. Putting myself in the situation of that song playing while I'm getting down. No. See, that will not work. I won't be able to concentrate. It's just gonna be like, hello, hello.
All right, we're gonna go on to the last one.
Oh, finally.
You have the choice of either Coldplay Yellow or Dave Matthews Band Crash Into Me.
I'm going to pick the yellow one just because the other one sounds like a discordant mess. And one might argue that that's how it's supposed to be during sex, and those people are wrong.
Well, here's the thing. If you've ever heard any of their discography like I have, that's all of their songs. So I'm going to go with Coldplay. Mostly because then I'll be imagining the lead singer in that, and his voice.
You sound like you have problems with your current partnership lineup.
No, I don't. It's just a lot of lead singers in band are sexy. And if I'm going to be listening to a song, I'm going to be imagining them anyways. Usually I don't have sex to music.
Fair point. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. It's incredibly homoerotic.
What do you picture when you're having sex and you're listening to music?
I mean, the last song I had sex to was Spooky, Scary Skeletons, so you tell me.
You're imagining skeletons?
Not the original, the remix. The 10-hour version.
So you're imagining dubstep skeletons?
I don't really know what I was imagining. I was actually paying attention to what I was doing.
I find music distracting if that hasn't been made clear.
She finds Justin Timberlake distracting is what she finds.
I was an NSYNC fan, man! I was a boy band fan from a very young age.
So what you have is repressed pedophilia.
Isn't that the other way? Because I was the young one?
Were you? Oh yeah, I guess you were younger.
You're trying to call me a pedophile.
Repressed Lolita complex. Reverse Lolita complex. I'm going to stop talking.
Internalized misogyny.
Internalized Lolitahood. Now that we've gotten that out of our system and out of our speakerphones for the time being, it's time to head into our video break. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll be right back.
Oh, remember when Lemon was in this bag? Oh, I love Lemon. Remember Peach? Oh, but what about Wild Berries? Oh, I remember.
Welcome back, everyone, to this night's edition here at Of Duelists and Drunkards. We're going to head right into our next segment, which is, of course, the List of the Week. This week, we're going to have Rockstar give you a fun and exciting list. Rockstar, tell us all about it.
Well, today's listicle is about famous people who disappeared without a trace. And the first one on our list is an author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who is of the Petit Prince fame, or the Little Prince.
The Little Prince. We do not speak French here in America.
I wanted to show off how I can butcher the French language. Leave me alone. Well, you're ridiculous. Now that you are done insulting French language and accent...
No, come on. Come back at me. The contest.
Having a ho-ho contest.
Oh,
Oh ho ho!
oh,
Can't do it. Stop! We're doing a listicle.
We're gonna make this a video later.
No.
All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He actually disappeared in 1944. He was flying his plane to the south of France. When he did not turn up when he was supposed to at the army base, headlines went all over France, and then suddenly it went all international, stating that they could not find the author. They eventually found in 1998 his silver bracelet that had his name engraved in it. It turned up in a fisherman's net off the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. In 2000, the very next thing that was found was a diver went down there to find pieces of his plane. Unfortunately, to this day, we have no idea of the fate of the author of the Le Petit Prince. Number 2 is an actor by the name of Joe Pickler.
Does he pick pickle peppers?
I'm not even sure I'm saying his last name right. Maybe it's Pitchler. What? Why are you laughing at me?
Yes, those are very similar. Go ahead.
So Joe Pitchler is best known for Beethoven's third and fourth movie. He's one of the child actors on there, and he's also known for being the lead.
Oh, you meant the dog. I was trying to think about that for a second. I was like,
I meant what do you... Oh, no, yes, the movie about the dog.
yeah, I was trying to think. I was like, what are you talking about? It's
Beethoven.
Like, not Amadeus. Oh, you mean the dog.
I was like, no, the dog doesn't... Oh, my God.
I mean, the dog's gone too, but I mean, that's just expected at this point. All right. Yeah, okay, I understand now. Go ahead.
He was also known for being the lead in the movie Varsity Blue from 1999.
Which none of us watched.
In January of 2006, he goes missing. I believe what had happened was he was like playing cards with some friends that day. But later that same day, his card was found full of notes, which had authorities worried that he had committed suicide. His apartment was found unlocked, and his friend called around 4 a.m. the day that he went missing, and his friend and Joe was completely drunk and upset. To this day, we don't know what happened to him. His body has never been recovered. His family won't accept that it was a suicide. It is unfortunate. So the third one on the list is known mostly because he is part of a rich family, Michael Rockefeller. He was kind of the black sheep of his family. He was very into the arts and photography. At some point, he got very interested in the Asmats, a native tribe of the Netherlands. He used to go on a lot of expeditions down there to find out more about this particular native tribe, take lots of pictures with him. There was only one slight problem. They were notorious cannibals. In 1961, he went down there again, but this time his boat got overturned a little too close to them, and he decided to try to make the trip. It was 12 miles from shore. He did swim to the coast, but we're not sure if he even made it to the coast. He might have drowned. He might have been eaten by a shark or a crocodile. But the most, I don't want to say reputable, but the most commonly held belief is that the Asmats did in fact kill him and eat him. Mostly because of I believe someone went down there to talk to the tribe and found out that they were bragging about killing him. We're still not terribly sure what happened because we don't have body or remain from him at all. So he's still considered missing. Number 4 on the list is Nefertiti. So this disappearance is a little different because obviously this is ancient history and we're talking mostly about texts.
Ooh, archaeology.
Right. She was known for being a very beautiful queen and one of the most powerful queens of Egypt as well. In the 14th year of their reign, it was documented that their child had passed away. And very shortly after this reference, all references to Nefertiti vanished. There was not one word mentioned about her again. Historians hold several theories, it's still kind of debated in the historian world, about what had happened. One of them is that she fell out of favor because she could not make a male heir. All of her heirs happened to be female. There was another one where she abandoned the religion of Aten, which was a monotheistic one. And or alternatively to that one was that she was exiled because they went from monotheistic to polytheistic, back to their old religion of having the reign of gods. There's another theory that she might have committed suicide over the grief of losing their daughter as well. And the most reliable one, the one that historians believe happened most likely, is that she adopted the pseudonym of Semenkhkare until their stepson Tutankhamun could rule. I put that one on there because it seemed really interesting how she could just disappear from the texts after being very well documented by the Egyptians. And the last one is kind of an exception to the rule because this person isn't actually famous. It's who he boxed that kind of gives him his fame. This man is named Sweet Jimmy Robinson. And the person he boxed, famously, was Muhammad Ali. His disappearance was not actually known until Stephen Singer decided that he was going to attempt to get all the signatures of every single boxer who boxed Ali. He managed to get everybody but this one man. And when he went on this mission to find him, he didn't find the date of birth, not any public record of him. He had former FBIs and PIs look for this man, boxing historians, and nobody had a lead on where this man was found. He eventually went to ESPN's Wright Thomas, who ends up writing a bit of a very interesting article. If you want to read it, it's called Shadowboxing, where he attempts and fails to track this man down. Unfortunately, all that Wright Thompson ever found was a bunch of people who claimed to be him, somebody who had his same name but was not him, and a bunch of people who claimed to see him either be homeless, have passed away. There's a lot of claims of what happened to this guy, but nobody actually knows who he was. In fact, I believe there is a theory going around that this Sweet Jimmy Robinson was actually a pseudonym. The story about him even fighting Ali is a little strange because one of the reasons we don't have anything on record was he was actually a stand-in for somebody else. It was supposed to be Willie Golat. He never showed. And Jimmy Robinson showed up last minute, basically carrying just an army bag, which is another reason why we don't have too much at all. And remember, out of 50 men, this is the only boxer who Ali fought who was not found, and it looks like we might not find out what happened to him at all. In that article, Shadowboxing, it explains how a lot of boxers, especially those who don't find fame, even those who find fame, kind of come down on hard times. A lot of them pass away in very saddening conditions, and a lot of them end up with dementia because of, the brain trauma from what happens when you box. So that is another possibility, is that he probably doesn't even remember that he is Sweet Jimmy Robinson. So that one I thought was a pretty interesting one for people who may not know that part of boxing history.
So many missing people. I almost feel like we need a different kind of wrap-up for that. Wait a second.
If you have any information about one of these cases tonight, call our toll-free number, 1-800-876-5353. Join us next time for another Unsolved Mysteries.
Is that actually the number?
Yes.
Did you actually memorize the Unsolved Mysteries number?
I have that memorized from my childhood.
The reason I did this particular...
1-800-876-5353.
The reason I did this particular listicle is a lot of the times, there's a lot of disappearances that happen every day, but rarely are they famous people. How hard is it to, disappear when you are, in fact, famous?
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to head into our next discussion topic. We're talking about Venom! Hooray! Aren't you all excited? So, first things first, a little bit of background here. From a critical standpoint, this movie did terribly. The critics are not pleased with it at all. Could give you a couple different potential comments here about exactly what was going on in very succinct sentences. Meanwhile, the audience reception has been unusually positive. In fact, audience positive ratings outranked A Star Is Born, which has a much more dedicated fan base behind at least one of the actresses in that. So, of course, as we were out at Cleveland Comic-Con, we had some downtime, and it was like, this is a very divisive issue. Let's go watch Venom. So we did. We headed up the Regal Cinema there, right next door, and we sat through it. It's worth mentioning that my familiarity with the Venom character is a little bit limited. I'm not really into comics at all to begin with. I think I have a very brief interaction with Venom. Well, I mean, if you don't count, Spider-Man 3 or something.
We don't count Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, I guess we don't. I've also had a brief experience with him, I think, in the Spider-Man cartoon, but that's really about the extent of it.
And in my background, I actually have read Spider-Man comics, specifically ones with Venom in them as well. So I am a little bit more familiar with the original origins of the Venom character, if you will.
So with that being said, how did they do? You go first, Roxy.
So as somebody who has read the comics, I basically had to put away my comic knowledge of the character and enjoy the movie.
That's what I usually say that you should do.
And when you do that, and you stop worrying about the origin story isn't right, or they made him funny and he's a serious character, it was great. I actually don't understand what most people's problem with it was. I mean, I understand most people want him to be connected as one of Spider-Man's villains, but I actually didn't mind him as, an anti-hero. I think it's a fresh look at the character.
That's a good way to put it. I rather enjoyed it myself. I felt that it was something that's kind of mimicking if not everything, at least the stylistic tone of Deadpool, which maybe that's where they're going to find their new footing, is these not so kid-friendly adult anti-heroes. That seems to be a trend. I know that they kind of stepped off of their intent to go with that R rating, which doesn't really feel like it affected anything in the long run. I mean, I could definitely see how they could have had a little bit more leeway and play with it more if it was an R rating. But I think, like you mentioned before about, people wanting to keep with the villain of Spider-Man, I feel like they're still leaving the door open for a potential crossover. In order to keep that the way it is, they have to stick within a certain hard limit, if you will, for the sake of the Walt Disney Company. Because if they go over that threshold, well, that will probably never happen.
Right.
I gotta say, it was not what I was expecting at all. Let me just put, let's just back up a little bit here. Tonally speaking, I was not expecting everything that happened in that movie.
Well, the problem is I had watched the trailers. Now, if you watch the trailers, don't go into the movie theater expecting what's on those trailers. When I first saw the trailers, I thought it was going to suck. It looked like it was going to be one of those DC gritty reboots of a character. So when I walked in there and actually managed to find myself laughing my butt off in certain areas, it's like, oh, it is a Marvel movie. It's a little gritty, but it still has the comedy. And I was going to say that's actually part of my favorite parts of the movie. It happened to be with Tom Hardy, or his character, Eddie Brock, fighting with the symbiote.
Hungry.
I got to say, if there was a single disappointment for me in the whole film, it was that when we get to the part where they're about to dive in, and he's like, "Oh well, sorry, I'll just put that up here now." Spoiler alert. So, favorite parts of the movie include things like what you talked about. I was also kind of we get a little teaser for female Venom. That was kind of fun.
That was fun.
And I think my favorite part was right before they go in for the final battle. He's like, "Well, why are you choosing to like stay with us on Earth?" And it's like, "Where I come from, I too am a loser." I like you, Eddie. You are kind of a loser.
Like me.
And I gotta say, my only disappointment with that entire process was like, well, why did you decide? Why are you helping us? And instead, he's like, he lists off a couple things, and then he's like, "You, Eddie," and I was like, "Oh, it so would have made my day if he had said pizza rolls."
Well, see, I actually would think they'd have to be tater tots because he ate mostly tater tots the first time he had the symbiote. The first one was like,
all right, fine, tater tots. Then. Fine,
because it would have been a callback.
Well, I thought he had pizza rolls the first time. Maybe they were tater tots. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell because
he was in a hurry and shoveling them in their mouth cold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think that's one of my other favorite parts is when they don't really know what the hell's going on with him. And he went into the restaurant with a huge beaver and he makes a scene in the restaurant. That's one of my other favorite parts.
Briefly sniffs the human and is like, No, not you.
Jumps into the tank with the lobsters and just bites one of the lobsters' heads off.
It did a good job of keeping things from being overcompensatingly dark. Because, I mean, Venom is a traditionally dark character, and even in the movie, rips someone's face off.
Several times. I explained to Streak when Mad Max Fury Road came out and he made me watch it, I didn't understand why they chose Tom Hardy. It kind of felt like he was just eye candy for the most part. But in this movie, it's like, oh yeah, he's got some acting chops. I actually like him as an action hero. He's not just eye candy on the screen. He can really, it felt like he really sucked me into his role.
Well, I mean, the problem with you seeing him in Mad Max Fury Road is that he basically has almost no dialogue.
He's
not really
just
a lot of
look angry.
There's not really a lot of room for his acting ability. You mentioned with the end credit scenes, and by the way, there are 2 of them.
Yes.
Though I'll say this much: the second one is not directly connected to the movie.
No.
So keep that in mind. If you need to skip the second one, which comes much later in the credits, it's fine. You mentioned a slight disappointment with what they teased for the next movie, potentially. And at this point, since we're already past the spoiler alerts, and the movie's been out for over a week, I'm sure you could Google it if you probably already did. They're teasing.
They're teasing Carnage.
Mm-hmm.
And I will admit, he is a comic book character that I don't have as much comic book knowledge. I've read 1 or 2 comics with Carnage in it, so I know the basic structures of his character. But it took me all the way up until he said Carnage to realize, oh, this is Carnage. And admittedly, it's not their fault. They did kind of drop in hints with the sociopathic serial killer and stuff like that.
Apparently the blood writing on the cage was also indicative.
Right. I don't know. It kind of feels rushed. Like they don't really have a plan of what to do with Carnage. Like they're just throwing him in there because everyone wants to see Venom versus Carnage. And we've always wanted Carnage on the silver screen.
Well, I thought it was interesting because I don't know what changes they're going to make. I mean, I have a basic understanding of the origin of Carnage in the comic books. And in that, Carnage is Venom's offspring and just kind of like gets away from him because, well, you know, it's a symbiote. It's like, oh, well, whatever. Kid, bye.
Right.
And that's how, and when Eddie's in prison, which is I very briefly alluded to, I think. Mm-hmm. Like they talk about the New York incident, so I'm assuming that that's what he was in prison. But I mean, like, obviously, because of the timetable, that's not going to work out for how Carnage will get in contact with the serial killer character, who is played by Woody Harrelson, of all people.
Yeah. I don't know how that's going to turn out. I mean, I like the actor.
He's had his moments.
Yeah. I mean, I really liked him in Hunger Games. I think that's the problem, is I still see a drunk sitting across from him. A very lovable drunk.
I think part of the problem is, well, I guess you could say, the way you put it, rushed. I'm just trying to think, because of the way the new origin works for the Venom character, I don't know how they would play it out with him, because at the time when they first meet, well, he's already a serial killer, so the question becomes, did we miss something? Is there going to be like a parallel timeline that reaches back into the continuity of this first movie to explain where this Carnage symbiote's going to come from? Or is this like something they're just going to tease right now, and they might not even come back to it in the second movie for all we know?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean by rush. It just kind of feels like you guys changed the origin, which I'm totally okay with. I'm not upset that you guys changed how the origin works at all. But if you're going to tease Carnage when we've seen basically all the symbiotes there, unless you're telling us that in that moment that Eddie Brock is having an interview with him, something happens between him and the symbiote Venom.
Maybe it does. I mean, I don't know.
I'm not saying every Marvel, after credit is the best after credit either. Surely Marvel from Disney at this point, it has had some flops. But this one really just feels like we need to have an after credit because we are a Marvel-like production. We need to shove an after credit in there somewhere. Oh, people want Carnage. Let's just shove Carnage in there and we'll figure it out later.
That sounds like you're going to start taking a shot at Stan Lee's cameo, which happens.
No. I like the Stan Lee cameo.
Yeah, I thought it was one of the better ones, personally.
Well, I don't think it's one of the better ones, but I definitely like it.
Oh, it's one of the better ones. What is that? It looks delicious.
No, I think my favorite one is when he's with the Watchers. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah. I remember that now that you mention it. Yeah. So in the end analysis, Venom worked for me. It was definitely worth my time. I might even, honestly, I might go see it again. Maybe give it a shot in 3D, but as evidenced by the credits, it was a conversion job. I don't think that there's something huge that I'm missing by not seeing it in 3D. So feel free to just go see it on the standard 2D screen. I don't think you're going to miss that much from that.
I don't think so, although I have heard at least one review from one of my personal friends that they went to go watch it in IMAX 3D, and it was amazing, apparently.
Well, I'm sure the portions that were in IMAX might be amazing. Yeah, that's true. I could see that.
So if you happen to have a chance to see it in IMAX 3D, try it out. Maybe it's actually a good movie in IMAX 3D, but I think you could still get a 2D movie and still get the same enjoyment out of it. I'm planning on taking Streak, who was kind of dubious about watching it in the first place.
No, well, that's because he's a comic bro. I've never heard him not complain about comic continuity with these movies.
He hasn't complained for all the Disney ones yet, but if we're talking Fox Marvel, then yeah, he's complained every single time. To be fair, again, Venom does not have a good trailer at all. It does not prep you for what's going to happen in the theater.
I mean, preps you for the special effects, which are quite nice. But yeah.
Yeah, but it makes it look like it's going to be a lot darker and a lot more depressing.
Maybe that's why the critics were so upset, but I almost feel like it was a reward.
Yeah, I agree.
I won't go as far as to say it was a bait and switch, but it felt like they kept a little bit of a cover on part of what they were going to do with the project.
To be fair, a lot of the times I'd like to go in there with my expectations lower than it really is.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come into the final segment of tonight's episode. You know the drill from last week. We're going to be doing That's Pretty Cool, but it's going to be something spooky or scary or mysterious. Not high-pitched enough. I don't know how it goes, actually. Never mind.
does not sound like the theme at
Well, you
all.
didn't sound like it either, so ha. So let's get into it. That's Pretty Spooky, comes from yours truly, Mr. Panda. I'm going to be telling you about a fun little aspect of urban legend trivia that actually turned out to be true. And in order to understand this little bit of trivia, you have to have a little bit of familiarity with the Halloween series, specifically the nemesis of, well, all the Halloween movies from number 2 forward, Michael Myers. There's an urban legend surrounding the mask that he uses, that it is a quote-unquote William Shatner death mask or Captain Kirk death mask.
Okay.
Like something they made for like a corpse stand-in, one of the movies.
Oh, okay.
So here's the thing, though. It turns out that that's not wrong. Courtesy of one of the production designers, I think was his role, a Rick Sternbach told the tale of how they were going back in to make the next movie, and they found out they only actually had the one mask, and they couldn't figure out anywhere in any of these costume stores where this thing had come from. So what he did was, he was examining it, and he managed to find a little section at the bottom of the neckline that had a company called Don Post Studios on it, and a serial number. So he did his best, and he managed to track down the company, and called them up, and was like, hey, is this yours? Do you have more? And it's like, let me check. Oh, yeah, that's our William Shatner mask. And so they sent him a bunch of them. So as it actually turns out, the so-called Captain Kirk death mask is in fact a cast or similar visage to William Shatner that they used on Michael Myers. And I think they actually took us through. There's a video online somewhere that you can find that shows you the process of taking the mask and turning it into the Michael Myers mask with makeup effects.
Right.
And as it turns out, this confirmation we got from the production guy isn't the first time it's come up.
Right.
William Shatner separately confirmed it in a random interview, like back in the 80s or something. And he talked about how, oh yeah, like he actually went out trick-or-treating with his kids as Michael Myers. Just for the sheer meta-ness of it.
Yeah, that sounds like something Shatner would do.
So yeah, guys, the Michael Myers mask is a death mask.
That's not where I thought you were going with this. That's pretty spooky.
Well, that is still pretty spooky. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our time here tonight of Duelists and Drunkards. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and everything that was in it, including my random ramblings. We hope you will continue to sit with us for many weeks to come, and hopefully see you at a few conventions down the road. But until then, please remember that this is the podcast where there are not any duelists, but there are plenty of drunkards. Bye.
Bye-bye!